Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee of the United States Senate. We will call the meeting to order and welcome our witnesses today. We want to welcome Chief Cosby and Administrator Ducheneau and Associate Chief Coleman. Welcome to all of you, and we appreciate everyone being here. This committee has a very important job ahead, as we know, which is to pass the next Farm Bill with strong bipartisan support, and we are going to work hard to do that. It's our job also to make sure that our farmers, our families, and our environment are all supported in this process. And our farmers have a critical job to do as well, growing food, fiber, and fuel for our country and our world, while also protecting our land and our water. This is nothing new for us in Michigan, where protecting the Great Lakes is part of our DNA. The Farm Bill provides important conservation and forestry tools that can help farmers and foresters keep our water clean, improve the resiliency of our land, and provide habitat for wildlife. And importantly, they are the kinds of tools that our farmers use, they want, and they need. But right now, many of our conservation programs are oversubscribed, some as many as 3 to 1. With recent investments in programs such as EQIP and the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, which I created in the 2014 Farm Bill, we are finally able to address the backlog of farmers who want to be able to use these important conservation tools. And we know the Farm Bill is a jobs bill, and conservation and forestry investments are no exception. Conservation and forestry provides economic opportunities and jobs across our country in rural and in urban communities. In 2018, for the first time, we recognized urban agriculture in a significant way. My Urban Agriculture Act laid the groundwork to establish the Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production, which is housed in the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And I'm pleased to see all of the work that the USDA has done to integrate and accelerate urban agriculture. In the 2018 Farm Bill, this committee made great strides to give the Forest Service additional tools to manage our national forests. We provided for expedited treatment of forests impacted by insects and disease, built on the successful Good Neighbor Authority to create efficient partnerships between state and federal foresters, and established competitive programs to fund source water protection and landscape-scale restoration projects. These investments and many others in the 2018 Farm Bill will aid in overall economic growth and the development in rural communities, combat climate change, and increase the health and protection of wildlife habitat. Without healthy forests, air, water, and other natural resources suffer. As we support farmers' efforts to address emerging challenges across the country, from algae blooms in the Great Lakes to drought in the West, voluntary conservation tools are more important than ever. Matching public dollars with private investment was a success in the 2018 Farm Bill, and the impact of these projects is seen in all 50 states. The interest and involvement from the private sector has increased since 2018, and I look forward to hearing today how conservation programs are helping farmers succeed, as well as bringing new investments and partnerships into this work. I'm sure we'll hear about the disastrous wildfires that are hurting our western states. Since forest health and wildfire threats do not end at the federal property line, I want to hear about the Forest Service plan to aggressively treat 50 million acres of national, state, tribal, and private forest land. I want to hear more about the Forest Service, how it will continue to coordinate restoration efforts across ownership boundaries while engaging on creating fire-adapted communities. As we look forward to the 2023 Farm Bill, we must continue to support smart forestry and conservation practices, recognizing the importance of the investments we have made and looking forward to the needs of the future. I have letters from stakeholders, groups with over 700 signatures supporting our robust investments in conservation and forestry, and I would ask unanimous consent that these letters be entered into the record. Without objection, so ordered. I also want to acknowledge the chair and ranking member of our Conservation, Climate, Forestry, and Natural Resources Subcommittee, Senators Bennett and Senator Marshall. We look forward to strong partnership in your leadership on these issues. With that, I'll turn to Ranking Member Bozeman for any opening remarks that he would like to make.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for convening today's hearings. We welcome our witnesses. We appreciate the great job that you all are doing. And we're excited to have today's hearing on conservation and forestry. Both of these issues are so important in the natural state. Productive farms and forests benefit wildlife, the environment, the quality of life, and the economy of rural Arkansas. The Farm Bill conservation programs are successful because they are voluntary, incentive-based, and locally led. I view this reauthorization of the Farm Bill as an opportunity to renew our commitment to working lands conservation, where local resource concerns and producer-focused programs are the priority. Conservation needs and the needs of our producers are as diverse as the crops they grow and the land that they grow them on. Our programs must reflect this reality and provide the flexibility our farmers and ranchers need. Washington prioritized a limited set of practices or natural resource concerns. If they prioritize it, it would undermine the continued success of the USDA's voluntary conservation programs. The prioritization of resource concerns must be left to the local level, where producers decide how they can best address their unique and varied landscapes and needs. Cover crops might not work in dry climates, but capturing water and preventing erosion are important resource practices farmers and ranchers can employ, and the funding and flexibility should be there for them to do so. Producers in Arkansas provide winter habitat and rice fields for migrating waterfowl. Seeing tens of thousands of birds all take wing from the flooded rice fields is one of the most amazing experiences to behold. My farmers need the cost sharing necessary to level their fields and manage their water. Not only does this conserve resources and make the farmers more efficient, it also provides irreplaceable wildlife habitat. While we must maintain the elements of our Farm Bill conservation programs that make them successful, we cannot take on risky proposals that endanger the safety net. Tying crop insurance to incentives for certain conservation practices dictated by those in Washington should be off the table so we can ensure this program continues to serve as a vital risk management tool for producers. We must hear from our farmers about their priorities and find the resources necessary to properly and adequately fund them. I know there is a genuine interest in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and sequestering carbon, and there's no better place to do that than the forestry title through active forest management. The decision not to manage our forest is devastating to the environment as it increases the risk for catastrophic forest fires. In California alone, the 2020 fire released approximately 127 million metric tons of carbon. In fact, the emission from that single fire season in California released twice the tonnage of greenhouse gases the state had reduced through regulation since 2003. There's tremendous potential in the conservation and forestry titles of the next Farm Bill. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on what additional authorities or flexibilities your agencies need to help modernize and streamline your efforts to keep our farmlands and forests working and healthy for a generation to come. Generations to come. I thank our witnesses for joining us today, and with that, I yield back, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Bozeman. So we'll now turn to our witnesses, and again, we appreciate your being with us. Dr. Terry Cosby is Chief of USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, where he began his career as an intern in Iowa. I think our two Iowa senators will appreciate that here on the committee. He grew up on his family's cotton farm and attended Alcorn State University in Alcorn, Mississippi, the nation's first black land-grant college. Prior to his current role, Terry served as NRCS's acting chief and has had numerous leadership and staff positions during his more than 40-year career at NRCS. So welcome. Mr. Zach Ducheneau, who is the administrator for the Farm Service Agency, and this is your second oversight hearing. We welcomed you at the commodity hearing. We welcome you back again today. His family operates a fourth-generation ranch on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation, and prior to this role, he served as the executive director of the Intertribal Agriculture Council, where he had worked since the 1990s. Zach has spent his career educating people about the importance of building new markets for producers and improving food systems. And Ms. Angela Coleman serves as the Associate Chief of the USDA Forest Service. Prior to this assignment, she served as Forest Service Chief of Staff beginning in 2015, where she oversaw the Chief's Office daily operations and staff, issues management, and Office of Communications and Legislative Affairs programs. She provided senior-level support to the chief of the agency and the executive leadership team to advance and deliver the agency's natural resource conservation mission. So welcome to all of you, and we'll start with Chief Cosby.
Chair Stabenow and Ranking Member Bozeman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today as you consider a new farm bill about critical support that conservation programs provide for American agriculture. My name is Terry Cosby, and I'm honored to serve as the Chief of the Natural Resources Conservation Service, an agency that works alongside producers to support the strength of agriculture, to protect and enhance our shared natural resources, to build resilience, and to mitigate climate change. I have spent the last 42 years of my career at NRCS engaging with agriculture producers and rural communities, helping them to invest in land that they work. My great-grandfather purchased our family farm in Tallahatchie County, Mississippi in the late 1800s, and the importance of conservation has been handed down through generations with the family farm. The 2018 Farm Bill made clear that voluntary conservation programs are critical to the continued viability of production agriculture. It also provides new incentives for producers and create new opportunities in urban communities. At NRCS, we take a comprehensive approach to conservation that is farmer-led and locally led to address resource concerns. Within this framework, and working closely alongside those we serve, NRCS supports the implementation of practices and systems to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and sequester carbon. These practices also provide other critical co-benefits, such as enhanced wildlife habitat, improved water quality, water conservation, and climate resilience. In recent years, NRCS has invested $197 million for 41 projects through the Regional Conservation Partnership Program that addresses climate change, improve water quality, combat drought, enhance soil health, and support wildlife habitat. Funding for producers that were directly tied to climate-smart agriculture and forestry practice totaled over $309 million in the Environmental Quality Incentive Program and over $192 million in Conservation Stewardship Program. NRCS has also provided $35 million in funding through our Conservation Innovation Grants to help agriculture producers adopt innovation practices and strategies. We also work in cooperation with other federal agencies to target federal funding, including a joint investment in the Department of Interior's Water Smart initiative to help farmers conserve water and build resilience, post-wildfire and disaster relief funding through the Joint Chiefs Landscape Restoration Partnership with the Forest Service, and the Sentinel Landscape to strengthen military readiness and address natural resource challenges with the Department of Defense and the Department of Interior. We continue to work with producers and implement the 2018 Farm Bill. We are also leveraging additional investment that Congress recently provided. The Inflation Reduction Act represented a historic, once-in-a-generation opportunity to address climate change and expand access to NRCS oversubscribed programs. NRCS is moving forward with FY23 implementation while also continuing to further expand capacities for the years ahead. On February 13, 2023, USDA announced the availability of FY23 IRA funding. Climate-smart agriculture and forestry practice and systems on EQIP and CSP can now be funded through IRA, while with sign-up and priorities set at the local level. For our easements programs, we're holding a targeted national sign-up and will continue to expand and reach opportunities through ASEP IRA investments in 24 and beyond. While we release the next RCPP funding opportunity this spring, which would include IRA funds for FY23, targeting to maximize climate benefits and streamline the process to reduce barriers for partners and producer participation. For IRA, we're also developing strategies to expand capacities, target funding, streamline programs, delivery, leverage partnerships, advance equity, and measure quantify outcomes. To maximize new and innovative ideas, we sought public feedback through a request for information on how to maximize and quantify climate mitigation benefits, streamline and improve program delivery to increase efficiencies and expand program access for producers. We will continue to identify and adopt additional changes based on public feedback in FY24 and in the future years. We've also been working to implement another critical piece of legislation, the bipartisan infrastructure law, which funds NRCS programs that help community rehab aging dams, protect and restore wet watersheds, and recover and reduce hazards from major storms, wildfire, floods, and other natural disasters. NRCS has prioritized providing ongoing relief to communities impacted by severe weather events such as wildfire, floods, and hurricanes and other natural disasters. We have also prioritized carrying out projects in limited resource areas for our underserved communities where there is a severe need for watershed infrastructure to protect the entire communities from flood, natural disaster, and other watershed-related concerns. In closing, none of the NRCS accomplishment could be possible without our more than 10,000 employees in every state and territory across the country. Agency employees work incredibly hard to connect with farmers, ranchers, forest land owners, tribes, and partners to implement our many programs and initiatives. I'm honored to lead so many dedicated conservationists in my role. I appreciate Congress' continued support for NRCS and our work to combat climate change, address drought, advance equity, and support voluntary conservation on working lands. I look forward to the discussion today.
Well, thank you very much. And next, we're pleased to hear from Administrator Ducheneau, and you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning and thank you. Chairman Stabenow, Ranking Member Bozeman, distinguished members of the committee, it's always an honor and a privilege to appear before this august body and talk about the important issues of the time. Since our last visit, when we met about commodities and credit, I've had the opportunity to go to Minnesota and visit with some of our partners in conservation in Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. I had a chance to visit with some distressed borrowers who have received assistance through IRA. I also had a chance to visit Tree Range Poultry, where a young man in southern Minnesota is using free range poultry to improve soil health in the margins of farmlands, which is a really important aspect of the work that we get to share in. I also got to sit through a blizzard in South Dakota as I spent some time with the 5th generation on the farm. Another blizzard in a series that have been ravaging that part of the country on the heels of 2 years of severe drought. So the conservation efforts that we are going to talk about today are critically important to help mitigate those impacts and be ahead of that. Because we all know that you can't plan your way out of a drought, you have to plan for the next one. So conservation is a vital tool. I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight some of the programs along with several updates and improvements we've made in the last couple of years to our conservation programs and have some time to answer some questions from you all about them. Of course, our flagship program for conservation is the Conservation Reserve Program. It's one of the largest private lands conservation programs in the United States. And through CRP, we pay producers a yearly rental payment to change the nature of production in environmentally sensitive areas by planting species that will improve environmental quality. The long-term goal of the program, of course, is to reward producers who establish valuable land cover, which in turn helps improve soil health, water quality, prevent erosion, and reduce the loss of wildlife habitat. There are several ways producers and landowners can participate in CRP, including through our general grassland and continuous signups. Last year, we accepted more than 2 million acres in general signup, 3 million acres in grassland signup, and 877,000 acres in continuous signup. The 2018 Farm Bill established a cap for CRP, setting the cap at 25 million and moving it up to 27 million by this year. At the direction of the Secretary, we've prioritized increasing access to CRP, strengthening climate benefits of the program, and now have the program on an upward trajectory of enrollment. To increase producer interest, FSA-adjusted soil rental rates, where data supported such an adjustment, increased payments for practice incentives, and we also added a climate smart practice incentive for CRP general and continuous signups to better leverage this program for positive climate outcomes. We updated the grassland CRP rental rates, and that resulted in an increase in over 1,000 counties in that grassland rate, which really drove the participation in that meaningful working lands conservation program. We've made significant strides, like the Chief has, in our work to expand access to underserved communities, specifically through our Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. That's a partnership program which targets conservation benefits identified by local organizations or states or regional organizations. Through CREP, for the first time ever, 3 tribal nations in the Great Plains are partnering with the USDA to have meaningful participation in the Conservation Reserve Program. And we're really proud of that work and hope to use that model in other places of the country to really bring regionally important conservation goals to fruition. Our Conservation Division also administers key disaster assistance programs, such as the Emergency Conservation Program and the Emergency Forest Restoration Program, and we continue to work to improve our implementation of these programs in the wake of disasters. As I close my testimony, I'd like to reiterate that ag producers are the original conservationists, and conservation is an integral part of the work we do at the FSA. We're focused on weaving conservation values into the DNA of all of our programs, old and new, so that our ag communities that face more frequent and intense climate-induced disasters are better prepared to mitigate them and navigate out the other side. I'm grateful for the leadership and expertise of the FSA's Conservation Division, our staff and headquarters and around the country, working hard every day to make these programs work for the producer, and I value the tools and authorities the committee has provided us to deliver these services to our producers, and I look forward to supporting the efforts of the committee as you craft the new Farm Bill, and I welcome your questions on our program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll now hear from Associate Chief Coleman. You're recognized for 5 minutes. Welcome.
Chairwoman Stabenow, Ranking Member Bozeman, and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to sit in for Chief Randy Moore, who's at home recovering from COVID. I serve as the Associate Chief of the Forest Service and have been with the agency for 30 years. In that time, I've served across the country with half of my time in the Southeast. I served on the Jefferson in Virginia, the Washita in Arkansas, the Francis Marion Sumter in South Carolina. And then I later worked as the Deputy Regional Forester in the Pacific Southwest in California. I've learned forest management and land stewardship from the ground up, and I've witnessed tremendous change over the years. And this includes the helpful changes we've seen in the Farm Bill with the Forestry title. Each new Farm Bill has equipped us with essential tools that enable us to tackle the natural resource challenges we face, strengthen our work with all communities and partners, and equitably serve all Americans. It's no surprise, then, that reducing the threat of wildfires across the Western landscapes is highest on our list of priority work. Through the wildfire crisis strategy, we've ramped up to treat the right places at the right scale, using an all lands, all hands, all USDA approach. And recent investments by this Congress give us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take bold and strategic action. And we're working to do just that, and we're putting every dollar to good use. This past January, we announced investments of $930 million in our 21 highest risk landscapes in the West. This work will benefit 200 communities, protect critical infrastructure, and improve forests. We're grateful to the Congress and this committee in particular for providing these resources to seed our initial work. But we know that sustained execution is needed, and we're depending on continued federal investment coupled with funding and capacity from our partners to keep the gains that we're making. And the tools in the Farm Bill play a pivotal role in reducing wildfire threats and promoting resilience in our forests. We need management options that remove barriers and promote shared stewardship and cross-boundary work. The Farm Bill is uniquely suited to do that. Families and individuals own most of America's forests, my family included. And through landscape scale restoration, we work with states to assist private landowners in achieving conservation goals. This ensures that private lands remain in forests. Further, wood innovation grants accelerate new markets for wood products and wood energy. Cross-laminated timber is one such innovation. And this type of construction at the University of Arkansas and Walmart's corporate campus have catalyzed new markets for Arkansas lumber. Michigan State University leads the Midwest, and Milwaukee serves as home to the tallest wood building at 25 stories. And the National Agroforestry Center also offers the latest research to farmers for their use. We owe thanks to this committee for the Good Neighbor Authority, 380 agreements, 38 states, triple the groundwork since 2018. This tool strengthens ties and work with states, tribes, and counties, and we access expertise and capacity for large landscape work. And finally, the Farm Bill supports collaborative forest landscape restoration projects. They expand science-based collaborative work and leverage partner dollars. This work has reduced fire risk on more than 4.6 million acres, and it helps us protect communities like the Pagosa Springs community in Southwest Colorado. So we're working hard to leverage all the available authorities and funding, but obviously there is much work to do, especially with so much at stake. So your work on the next Farm Bill underpins our efforts to improve forest conditions, reduce threats to vulnerable communities and infrastructures, and we look forward to working with you. I look forward to your questions, and thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and please let Chief Moore know that we wish a speedy recovery for him.
Finally got caught.
I know. So we've all been in some way or another affected by this. So let me first start with Chief Cosby. And the NRCS has done really a tremendous amount of work to identify conservation practices that have a climate benefit. It's really a win-win both for our farmers and communities as well as the environment. However, the current list of practices identified by NRCS heavily favors commodity crops. What would it take to identify and develop practices for other areas of agriculture, including specialty crops, dairy, livestock, and western drought-impacted regions?
Senator, thank you for the question. And, we've been working pretty hard to look at these practices and identify those. We've identified close to 40 now, but we're going to continue to do that work because we know it's vitally important that we look at all landscapes and all crops and all practices that support that. As we look around the country, we have a lot of different practices that we can offer. And as the senator said this morning, sometimes there's regions where cover crops and some of these things just don't work. And so we're looking at this. We are working locally with our folks out across the country, and this is a locally led process where we're working with the states and our staff across the country to identify those practices. And then how does those practices help us mitigate some of the things that we're looking at as far as carbon sequestration and greenhouse gas emissions? And so we will continue to identify those. The teams are working very hard on that, and we will continue that work.
Well, I think it's very, very important, obviously, to be getting the input directly from the local communities. I know I'm hearing a lot from folks involved in fruits and vegetable production. They would like to be able to do more, and we really need to provide opportunities for all parts of agriculture as we are doing this. So I encourage you to continue to do this. Administrator Ducheneau, talk a little bit more about CRP. You've recently opened up the general sign-up. As you said, there are 23 million acres enrolled in CRP with 1.9 million set to expire this year. It's well below the $27 million cap that we had set in the last Farm Bill. So talk a little bit more about what's happening with CRP. How can we ensure that the program is really working for our farmers?
Thank you for the question, ma'am. really proud of the work we've done in CRP to incentivize folks to participate voluntarily in this program. And the collaboration that we've had with our local stakeholders in that has led to our process of adjusting soil rental rates to where they more closely track with what those local communities need. And I know that's at the forefront of the concern that we have as we continue to make changes to the program. We want to make sure that we're balancing the need for producers to have an additional income stream along with their conservation needs. We're really going to emphasize the CREP agreements in the next year, ma'am, because we see that as an opportunity to really get the resource concerns from the local communities. The 27 million acre cap, I personally see that as a goal that you all set for us. And we're going to do our level best to get to that goal by meaningfully deploying these important resources in a way that we can improve soil health, improve resilience, and improve climate change mitigation strategies for our producers all across the country through those CREP agreements like we've done in Indian country. They stand to bring into the program around 3 million acres of grassland, CRP alone.
Okay, thank you very much. And Associate Chief Coleman, in this committee and others I serve, we hear about the need for Forest Service to increase the pace and scale of national forest restoration. What's the biggest impediment to accomplishing more restoration? And what's the best tool to protect communities and restore landscape post-catastrophic wildfires?
Thank you so much for the question. And obviously, we are putting our work and our efforts toward implementing the wildfire crisis strategy. It's science-based, and it really gives a good picture of the work that has to be done at scale. And for that, we're talking 20 million acres on national forest system lands and 30 million off in other lands. That is our best tool for getting ahead and creating resiliency and protecting communities. I also want to just mention, as far as tools that help us, I can't not mention the Replant Act.
Yes.
We had to make some hard choices in the past about where we invested our money to reforest. But with the new investments, this gives us a real shot at, first of all, restoring our infrastructure and seedlings for climate-adapted trees to grow on the landscape. So those are our two best preemptive tools. And, you know, we're looking at a 10-year strategy in doing this work, and we're looking at doing it in partnership. When it comes to the impediments piece, I want to just go straight to where we are doing our hardest to kind of make up the distance, and that is in our capacity, both internally and externally with partners. It is a tough working labor market at the moment, and we're having to overcome a lot of challenges associated with that. Everything from high rent, you know, people affordability and availability of houses for our employees, as well as competing for good talent. And the Forest Service had a lot of distance to make up. As you all know, we spent money on fire suppression and lost a lot of our non-fire capacity. And we're ramping that up and making progress. But that is the biggest, I think, challenge we're facing as far as impediment.
Thank you very much. Always the challenge of meeting the immediate crisis versus getting ahead of it on prevention. This is always the challenge. Well, I have other questions I will give to you for the record related to the Regional Conservation Partnership Program and urban agriculture. I appreciate the efforts on urban and indoor and other innovative producers and where we're going there to create more opportunities. So I will do that for the record, and I will turn it to Senator Bozeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and again, thank you all for being here. I know that you all are working really hard and doing lots of good things, but to be honest, I don't have any idea what those things are. To provide proper oversight, the committee needs regular updates on how and where the funds provided to USDA are being spent. Legislation has provided billions of dollars to USDA, yet we have no information on how the department is obligating the funding. And I guess my question is, can you commit within the next few weeks to provide us that information?
On behalf of the Farm Service Agency, sir, yes, we will.
And also on behalf of NRCS, yes.
Well, obviously, the Forest Service joins in doing that, sir.
Good, very good. Thank you very much. Chief Cosby, the Inflation Reduction Act prioritized climate and carbon sequestration in the conservation programs, neglecting maybe some important resource concerns regarding other things. As a result, this limits the ability for many producers in Arkansas to implement conservation practices on their land related to nutrient and water management because that legislation only focuses on climate. Will producers who are unable to implement climate or carbon sequestration projects still have access to both the Farm Bill and IRA dollars available through conservation programs?
Senator, thank you for the question. And I will tell you that the way this works is that we look at what happens at the local level. And we have these local work groups out there across the country that are working really hard to look at what those local resource needs are. And those things float up to the state. And so when you look at all of the dollars that the 2018 Farm Bill provided and also what the IRA provided, we are looking at how do we implement practices on the land and how does that work? And so it works very well. And those producers out there will have an opportunity to come in and continue to apply for those practices. And the same practices we're talking about that we've been applying for a lot of years also provide those benefits for climate. So it's not an if and, they all work, and it works very good together. So we will continue to offer all of the programs. We have 175 different standards that we work from. There's numerous amount of crops, from cover crops to no-till to rotations to all of those things. All of those things provide a climate benefit, and the farmers have been applying for those for years, all of my career. And so we'll continue to offer everything we have in our portfolio, but some provide better benefits than others, but farmers will have an opportunity to continue to apply.
So the crops that it's more difficult to sequester carbon, directly, aren't going to be left out.
No, sir.
And a significant amount of money is not going to go to particular areas compared to other areas.
We have a methodology that we look at. How does that work? We've collected a lot of data from all across the country to look at where the needs are. How do we do this? And so we've done this for years and years and years. And so IRA dollars, we will look at how do we also implement that through the same process.
Chief, we're very proud of your experience at the Ouachita National Forest. And again, we hope to, I know you're down there periodically. I hope to be down there with you in the not too distant future so we can brag on you. But I want to raise a concern that I have with the Executive Order 14072, which directs the Forest Service to define and protect old growth forest. As you know, foresters have never been able to agree on a definition of old growth. That's kind of the Achilles heel. I will submit a question for the record for a written response from the Forest Service, but I fear that the administration has asked USDA to take on an impossible task that will only end up in litigation while diverting precious time and attention away from important forest management activities. Now, to my question, markets for wood projects are critical, they're crucial to keeping our forest healthy and provide significant economic benefits to our rural communities. Companies and institutions across Arkansas are pioneering the use of wood products. You mentioned laminated timber, things like that. What role do you believe wood products markets play in keeping our forest healthy and working? And what actions are the Forest Service taking to expand the innovation, use, and adoption of wood products in both domestic and international markets? In other words, value-adding this tremendous resource that our country has.
Thank you so much, Senator, for the question, and I look forward to making my way back to the Ouachita to be with you as well. I think there are 3 points I'd like to make around markets. Having a healthy infrastructure, timber-producing infrastructure is essential for the agency to be able to accomplish the very ambitious goals that we've set out to improve resiliency in our forests, to protect communities from wildfire threats. So gotta have infrastructure that works, and gotta have producing companies that can produce timber on a regular basis. And we're continuing to commit our work there. But the second piece is in our efforts to implement the wildfire crisis strategy, we're gonna be also looking at small diameter wood and figuring out together how we build markets for that, because that product has to go somewhere as well. And lastly, you mentioned it, our investments in wood innovation are a hallmark of how we need to look at our future. And obviously Arkansas is out in front when it comes to utilizing mass timber. But the agency, through our work in our state and private programs, has doubled our investments there, and the projects are going up quite a bit. We got 1,600 on the book at this point. So that gives us a great deal of hope. But it's in those three areas, starting with a stable infrastructure for wood production all around the country, particularly in the West.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to Senator Bennett, and first, as Senator Bennett, when you were not in the room, I did indicate you are chair of our subcommittee on conservation. You and Senator Marshall, we're looking forward to the second half of the oversight process for conservation, which I know you will be leading at the subcommittee level.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd introduce somebody at the Commerce Committee, but thank you so much
I realize
raising that. And I want to sort of start by apologizing to my colleagues, because leading up to this Farm Bill, I'm going to be a broken record, and the chair already knows this, a broken record about the 1,200-year drought we're facing in the West. I mean, you can't, it's hard to hear those words and kind of get it in your head, but for our farmers and ranchers, our producers in the Rocky Mountain West, they've never seen anything obviously like this in more than 1,000 years. And all of the water infrastructure that we've built, the assumptions that we've made are assumptions that we really can't make going into the future. And it is creating in our producers a real sense that we've got to look at our federal ag programs kind of root and branch to understand how they can better serve the people that we're trying to serve. And so it's in that context that I approach this Farm Bill. Obviously, we've got huge labor constraints and other kinds of things too, but I think a lot when I sit around this table about the people that have sat around this table in past years, you know, the folks that put price supports in and other incentives in during World War I to feed our troops, you know, which was really, really important to do, but broke up a bunch of land that maybe shouldn't have been broken up. And then we went through the process of learning from the Dust Bowl, which resulted from that. And of course, eastern Colorado really was the epicenter for that Dust Bowl. And then we developed programs like CRP. I mean, there are others, but Administrator Ducheneau, this is a long-winded introduction to a question for you. You know, like CRP, where we had all the best intentions. This, you know, grew out of the Dust Bowl. It's evolved a lot since the Dust Bowl. It's been applied to worthy projects, I suppose, I know, around the country. But today, and for just one example, in Prowers County, Colorado, you can't get more to the heart of the Dust Bowl than than Prowers County, Colorado. We're seeing bids of $13 to $15 an acre in the heart of the Dust Bowl region, at the same time that farmers in other parts of the country are seeing an average of $300 per acre. And obviously, these low prices discourage, you know, anybody from putting their farm into the CRP program, which is the opposite of what we should be encouraging. And I've been in Iowa in a not very successful campaign, but I know thank you. It's good to be there. I know what the farmers they're facing, and I don't want to take anything away from them. But I also know that in Colorado we are facing those kind of Dust Bowl conditions again, and $13 an acre is just not going to achieve the policy objective that CRP wants. So, Administrator Ducheneau, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about these misaligned incentives and ask you whether you'd be willing to, as we get into this next Farm Bill, to work with me and to work with others on this committee to better reflect the reality of the situation that we're all confronting in the American West?
Thank you for the question, and I'll start with the last one. Absolutely, yes, we're willing to commit to work with you all. To the first question, and I want to empathize. I too have had several failed election campaigns, so not as meaningful as yours, but I
suspect your mother didn't start yours by saying, "Do we really need one more candidate in the race?" Which is what I heard. But
we'll have a longer visit about that, sir. But to your point on the rental rates in Prowers County, in my opening remarks, I had a chance to talk about one of the visions of CRP. And that vision is to change the nature of production on these lands, not necessarily just take it out of production, which makes it an enhanced income opportunity for producers alongside what they're doing. So we're really driving home the CRP grasslands program. And in that particular segment of the country especially, we have added an incentive for the Dust Bowl region to add an incentive payment to that for enrollment there. But especially in your state, CREP agreements are an important tool that we can use because that really helps us position our partner more meaningfully in the conversation about what's needed in those particular production systems. And we welcome opportunities to continue that work now and into the Farm Bill.
Well, I appreciate that, and I look forward to working with you. Because of my preamble, I'm out of time, but Madam Chair, I'm going to submit some questions to the record, particularly about forestry issues that we're facing again with that 1,200-year drought in the West. We've got to do more preemptively and proactively, and I hope to be able to persuade my colleagues that spending money preemptively is going to be better than spending it on the back end. But thank you for your answer, and Madam Chair, I yield.
Thank you so much, and we're so pleased that you're leading this effort. It is a horrendous situation you're going through, so different than Michigan being surrounded by water. We have very different kinds of things that we are challenged with as opposed to the droughts that you are seeing. So that's the importance of this committee, to be able to understand regions like yours and other areas in the country.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member Bozeman, and thanks for our witnesses for being here and for your testimony. Today we're talking about conservation, and as we all know, those farmers out there, they're our original conservationists. They raise their families on their farms, and it's in their absolute best interest to make sure that they are caring about the environment and their water quality. And I hear from our farmers about the importance of soil health as well, because we all know we can't make more dirt. So we want to be good stewards of the land so that our future generations have the opportunity to farm, just as my parents and grandparents. So following the devastating floods in 2019 in our great state of Iowa, over 4,000 acres of cropland and floodplains were voluntarily enrolled into the Emergency Watershed Protection Program. And that legislation would promote the restoration of hydrologic function on floodplain easements in this permanent program. So I know that natural resource concerns are valid, but we must ensure that we're using our taxpayer resources appropriately. And as we look to garner broad support for this very, very important farm bill, all funding should be carefully considered and streamlined to be more effective and efficient. And having said that, I do strongly believe conservation programs must remain voluntary, incentive-based, and flexible, because a one-size process does not fit all. We just heard that from Senator Bennett and the chairwoman, that there are different issues that exist out there. So much, when we're looking at the types of regulatory burdens around the conservation programs, they're very challenging and time-consuming, and so much so that I hear some of our farmers say, I'm just not going to participate because there's too much involved here. So Chief Crosby, How can we modernize the application and approval process so that some of our most popular conservation programs like RCPP, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, and EQUIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, can be better utilized?
And thank you for the question. And, you know, since coming into this job, that's something that I've been working very closely with my staff on. Through my 40-year career, I've seen this happen where we need to be able to be more flexible. We need to also streamline the application process so that farmers understand. This is especially true in the underserved communities, that we need to make sure that folks out there are able to participate. These programs seems like we haven't had broad participation in a lot of these programs because folks didn't understand the process. So one of the things that we're doing is we're out there, we're doing outreach. We're working with all communities. We're trying to talk about how these programs works, what are the benefits. And so we're looking at all communities, all sources, and trying to make sure that we are more flexible and our programs are more available to folks that want to participate. It sometimes is hard when you're in some of these communities to talk about these federal programs because there's not a lot of trust. And so we're out there, we're building trust, we're doing a lot of outreach work. There's some opportunities for folks to come in and work with us throughout the system. And so this is something that's very, very serious to us, and we're going to continue to do that to make these programs available.
Great, thanks, Chief, because if it is easier to apply and adhere to the program requirements, more people would absolutely be participating in it. And as well, Chief Crosby, precision ag and innovative technologies present different opportunities for farmers to improve their productivity and to be good stewards of their land as well. For example, new biological fertilizers use microbes to promote nutrients for plant growth while also reducing nutrient runoff. What role do you see for tools like these to be incorporated and eligible for cost share in conservation programs?
And one of the things that we do is we constantly look at our technical standards. I have a science and technology team that really work every day to look at what these new concepts are, new techniques, new technology, and how do we incorporate that into what we do every day at our agency. And so as these new things come online, we will continue to look at them. We work very closely with other agencies or other departments within USDA to understand how they work. And because most of the things we do, all of the things we do is science-based, and we have to make sure that technology is something that we should be using. And so we will continue to work and look at our standards and how we incorporate that into our standards and make sure it's available to farmers as it comes online.
That's great. Thank you so much to our witnesses. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Booker.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. I'm really excited that I've working on multiple bills to make improvements to the farm conservation programs, including a bipartisan bill for EQIP reform that I'll be introducing tomorrow. But I want to focus on another important issue. Mr. Ducheneau, I'm so grateful to see you here. Thank you for working so well with my team on a lot of really important things. And Section 2206 of the Inflation Reduction Act provided $3.1 billion to the USDA to provide relief for distressed borrowers with FSA direct and guaranteed loans, and to expedite assistance for those borrowers whose farms are really struggling. They're in financial risk. Last year, the FSA distributed the first $800 million of this funding. Can you just explain how this funding is being utilized by the FSA and how many distressed farmers received assistance?
Yes, sir. In that first round of assistance, there was around 11,000 producers. This week, we also made payments to producers based on disaster set-aside opportunities they may have exercised in the past. But in my opening comments, I alluded to a meeting I had with some distressed borrowers in Minnesota. We had a chance to talk with a borrower there who was a soybean wheat farmer. He's trying to transition into regen and soil health. Without this assistance, he wasn't going to make it there. And I think the stories are important in this so that we come to an understanding of the reality of the impact that we've had. Another producer had health concerns, lingering health concerns for several years. And this payment helped him right the ship and maintain that operation for future generations. Still another had the death of a spouse and lost an income on his farm, which is chilling that we have to rely on off-farm income to do this, because we have the luxury of having jobs where we don't need another job to make ends meet. And last and most importantly of those producers, there was an active duty military officer
Wow.
who doesn't meet the classification for veteran status in our programs to receive those additional benefits because of statutory challenges. He also received some of this IRA assistance and helped save the farm, helped him know that it was going to be there when he returned from that active duty military status. So the stories are important as the numbers, sir.
I mean, the stories are really compelling. Could you maybe tell me which states have received some of the most help, the most assistance?
Yeah, and we've recently released that data on state-by-state table. Oklahoma, Texas, and Arkansas are the three biggest recipients of the payments by virtue of the distribution of the borrowers.
That's extremely amazing. And again, each one of these stories is just so compelling on how these great Americans who are protecting our heritage have been really benefiting. And so I'm grateful that the FSA has moved so quickly. Again, your team is so impressive to me, helping over 10,000 farmers who were delinquent on their loans and at risk of losing their family farms to foreclosure. But now those farmers are receiving a big tax liability, right? In other words, they've got this help, but they have a tax liability related to the FSA assistance. Can you explain what this issue is and how it's causing some challenges for those great Americans?
As I understand it, sir, there were conversations during the crafting of that legislation that might have exempted this assistance payment from tax liability like some in the past had been. That wasn't the case, so producers now have received a federal payment. They're receiving a 1099-G, which spells out their taxable income. Many of our producers in some of our more underserved communities haven't had the ability to mature their operations to a level of sophistication where they have a retained CPA. So they are at jeopardy and continue to be at jeopardy because of the lack of ability to adequately plan for this tax consequence. And the timing of this action didn't help. It was right at the end of the year. And we all know that our taxes are a calendar year basis. So these producers received a pretty good sized lump sum at the end of the year in some cases, and not an opportunity to do things that would be investments in their farm to keep more of that money in circulation in their rural economy on their balance sheet before it's time to settle up with the IRS. So that's a critical important.
No, I appreciate it. And you said that we've done this before when we've helped distressed farmers, we've helped struggling farmers. We've exempted this before. It's not like we haven't done this before in a bipartisan way. I've introduced legislation to make assistance that these distressed farmers receive, to make this assistance non-taxable. I really hope the chair and the ranking member can help us to quickly get a bill enacted into law so we can save these folks that got that taxable event at a time that they were distressed. You know, these are the stories are so compelling. These are veterans. These are folks who've been on their family farms since the Homestead Act, and now are at risk of losing. And now the tax man can come and really upend this when this is something, again, that we've done, and exceptions we've made in the past. So I appreciate the time. I really appreciate your team, and I know some of them are sitting behind you. Just want to say thank you to their efforts. They are literally helping Americans who are generational farmers stay on their land. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. Thank you for raising this issue, and both as Chair of Agriculture, but also on the Finance Committee, will join with you to make sure that we exempt these dollars as we have done in other programs. So this is not new, what you're asking for. It's something that should be done, and I strongly support it. So thank you. Senator Highsmith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, witnesses, for being here. It's really good to see all of you, and I certainly appreciate what you do on behalf of farmers and ranchers throughout this country. And thrilled that I have Terry Cosby here from Mississippi, Tallahatchie County. Also is where Morgan Freeman is from. Some great people come out of Tallahatchie County. So proud to have you here. My question is very similar to Senator Ernst, and it's on the streamlining. You guys get the same calls that I get. You get the same complaints that I get. But I am a real strong supporter of voluntary conservation programs for working lands and to help our farmers and ranchers in the place of conservation practices, because we certainly need them out there doing that. And Mr. Cosby, my question is to you, and you've pretty much answered how we can simplify and streamline, and you're very aware of that. But would providing producers with equitable incentive payments that fully cover the cost of implementing conservation practices help ensure all our producers are able to participate?
That's just something that, we've discussed on numerous occasions, is the participation rate as well as the incentive to do these practices. Some of these are pretty expensive to do, and we're able to offer 75% up to 90%, and sometimes in some of the programs we're able to waive some things where we can go up to 100% on some of these practices. And so with the recent investments, I think we're going to have an opportunity to fund a lot more of these applications that are coming in through all of the programs. But we do still have folks out there that are struggling to put these practices on the ground because of the cost. And so we need to figure out ways to help them do that.
Okay, and the Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP, also that Senator Ernst alluded to, do you have any thoughts on ways we could strengthen the program for livestock producers, such as providing additional conservation enhancement practices to help them participate?
As with all of these programs, we still continue to look at how do we improve them. And through CSP is for that higher management of these farms. Folks go into equip and some of those, and then they build their farm to a place where they can qualify for the CSP program. And through these recent investments, we're going to see CSP grow, especially with the IRA dollars that are going to be coming forward for CSP. And so we'll be looking at all of those type practices to see if we can incorporate those into that. When we look at CSP, we've had a lot of folks that's really interested in it. They've looked at how they can build their farms, and these payments have been critical in times when there was no other payments coming in. So we want to continue that. We wanted to continue to expand CSP and look at other ways to get other folks in also.
Thank you very much on that one, and I have a little time left. Ms. Coleman, the forest industry is extremely important to rural communities and the overall economy in Mississippi. I'm former ag commissioner, and I've met with a lot of folks that are in the forestry business, but private working forests provide more than 46,000 jobs in the state, which drives an overall payroll roughly $1.7 billion annually. That's big for our folks in Mississippi. But the timber and wood products industry in Mississippi accounts for more than $8 billion in sales and manufacturing annually. So we're uniquely positioned to meet a growing market demand for timber and wood. I always say if we have anything in Mississippi, we've got a wood basket. But I'm hearing from constituents that more could be done to support wood products so that our working forest owners can sell their trees at a healthy price, and which will ultimately bring more prosperity to the rural communities that live and work near forested areas. How is the Wood Innovation Grant program advancing technology and adoption of wood as a building product?
Thank you for the questions, Senator. That this is a part of the country that I know very well, having spent most of my time in the Southeast and growing up in the state of Alabama, next door to Mississippi. So I know how important the wood products industry is to the economy. And the agency as well has stepped up when it comes to building new markets for mass timber. As I said in my opening, it is one of those growing areas that we are really ramping up our investments in, particularly when it comes to the number of projects. We've got 1,600 projects already, and we've doubled our investments, as well as we have 11 new mass timber projects. So the opportunity is there, and we are happy to work with you on making sure those opportunities are visible to the great citizens in the state of Mississippi, but it clearly is our area of growth.
Thank you very much, because we like to capitalize on what we have and what we do well, and we can grow timber.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. Senator Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just have to say, I was, a moment ago, I stepped out in the hallway and I had a chance to meet with Minnesota's soybean growers. And it was apt that they were here while we're having this committee hearing. Of course, they're very interested in the conservation programs and are very interested in passing a bipartisan farm bill, which is so crucial. I'm not interested in laying this over for another year or two, and so I'm really glad to be able to pass that message on to our committee while we're here together. So farmers and producers appreciate conservation programs. No one cares more about conservation than farmers. It's their land, their water, their health, and their future. And historically, Minnesotans have led the nation in participating in both the EQIP program and the CSP program, the Working Conservation Lands programs. But of course, not everyone in Minnesota is able to access these incentives. In 2020, less than 1/5 of Minnesotans who applied for EQIP or CSP funds were awarded contracts. So it's a big deal that we have delivered additional support for these popular and oversubscribed conservation programs in the Inflation Reduction Act. And I'd just like to ask everyone on the panel, where it's relevant, given the popularity of these programs, given the oversubscription of these programs, can you talk to us about what benefits you think we're going to be seeing both in resilience and also in production that we're going to see more of thanks to the additional support that we've been able to deliver through the Inflation Reduction Act? Maybe Mr. Crosby, you'd like to start.
And thank you for that question. And yes, most of these programs are oversubscribed. And right now, on the average, we're able to fund about 30% of the applications that we get through the 2018 Farm Bill. Last year, we received over 100,000 EQIP applications, and so we're only able to do a third. On the CSP, we received almost 24,000 applications. We're only able to do 35% of those. So these programs have been very oversubscribed. But with the investments from IRA, it's going to give us an opportunity to go back and maybe bring some of those producers forward. The other thing I want to remind is that we have to look at also the oversubscribed, but we also have to look at all the new customers that are also going to be walking through the door.
That's right.
And participate. So the team out there, as I explained before, it is a locally led process. We ask the states to sit down and talk about those resource issues, those resource concerns, and also come up with what is going to rank very high on the scale. That we have state technical committees that work through this. We have representation from all walks of life on those committees. But so we'll be looking at the oversubscribed as well as the new customers walking through the door, and IRA is going to give us an opportunity to expand these programs.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to comment on this, Mr. Ducheneau?
I would, please. Thank you. Good question. And I fall back on one of the conversations we had in the last hearing. The best conservation planning tool a producer can have is money in their pocket at the end of the production year. Right. They can spend at their discretion and on their time frame. That's truly voluntary. That's really incentive-based. And a lot of the work that we're doing at the agency is focusing on providing that financial foundation for producers, especially new and beginning and underserved producers, to start at that position by flexible financing. If we can provide producers the flexible financing they need at the beginning, they're better positioned to pay the cost share that's theirs, or they can just take the next step and go right into doing these climate mitigation, soil health strategies that are going to benefit their operation for the long term. We can't react our way out of a disaster, but we can sure plan our way around the next one.
Absolutely, and it's interesting because the soybean growers that I was talking to were raising this point that you're alluding to exactly, which is as the average age of farmers in this country and in Minnesota is creeping up to around 60. They appreciate the massive debt that these young farmers are taking on in order to literally move into the field. And so being able to have conservation programs that are accessible to them, which is what they want to do anyway, is just extremely important. Madam Chair, I only have a couple of minutes left, and I know that I've got colleagues that are eager to ask their questions, so I will just say I have a question for the record that relates to the work I believe we need to do that we all understand. As we're talking about conservation programs that are focused on sequestering carbon in the soil, and as we talk about how producers are interested, looking at opportunities for getting paid for that carbon sequestration, that there's a need for more research, I think, more better understanding of how that is working, that we have a good database. And so I'm going to submit a question to the record to you, Mr. Crosby, to get at that question and to get some information out about how we're measuring carbon sequestration and what we need to do there. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, and research is very important, so thank you for raising that. Senator Marshall.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just start by sharing how important I think conservation is to the Farm Bill. That Kansas farmers, American farmers were the original stewards. That we want to leave this world cleaner, healthier, and safer than we found it. And one of the ways we've been doing it, and will continue to do it, is through innovation. I think about all the great things happening in innovation in agriculture. For instance, a center pivot now, we can put a monitor on the end of the pivot with radar technology, and as that pivot goes around that quarter section of land, it measures the moisture content of the land. Soon we'll be able to measure the nitrogen content in the soil. There's a camera on that with machine learning is early detecting a fungus or a virus to that crop. That's how we're going to solve this problem. And that technology allows us to grow more with less. So we're growing more food with less fertilizer and less water. So as that pivot makes its second and third trip around that quarter section of corn, we're able to use less. So I want to start by thanking the NRCS for getting back with this on some technical assistance, with which legislation we hope makes it into the Farm Bill, which provides for us to use fertilizer at a less amount. So my first question is for Mr. Cosby. One of our priorities is the affordability of fertilizer in the United States. We're going to have to use some fertilizer, but it's not very affordable. It's probably the main input cost that people talk to me about back home. Our bill that are writing, the Fertilizer Sustain Act, requires NRCS to recognize certified crop advisors as technical service providers rather than having to go through the complicated eligibility provisions. Do you agree that breaking down the walls between the Certified Crop Advisors Program and the TSP program, including Section 590 nutrient management plan requirements, would help farmers?
Sir, we've worked very closely with the certified providers to become TSPs. One of the things that when I first came in, we looked at is how to make that process a lot simpler. And so we had the states doing that. So what we've done now, we've moved that. The states are working on it, but we've moved that more to a regional basis to make it a little easier, a little stressful. And we are looking at how do we make sure as those crop advisors apply, we use their experience maybe instead of the educational side of it. So we're going to make that less complicated, and I think there will be more technical service providers that will be coming in because we'll be looking at their lifelong experience instead of the education side.
Great. I want to spend a moment just talking about water conservation. We spend lots of time on the committee talking about the environmental impact of carbon, but I'd have to tell you, if you would talk to Kansas producers, I'm not sure which would be the bigger challenge, a lack of people for the jobs we have or a lack of water, and how important water conservation is. And I think that needs to be raised to the top somehow in more ways. I appreciate Senator Bennett mentioning the drought that we have ongoing as well. I guess my question for Mr. Cosby or Ms. Ducheneaux, I got it back, Mr. Ducheneaux and Ms. Coleman, sorry, I got it backwards there. What is the USDA thinking about water conservation? What more can we be doing?
Thank you, Senator. And I've been called far worse by people that know me far better. So, water is critical. Without water, none of the rest of this works. Yeah. Mniwachoni is what my people say. Water is life. And without that water, we're not going to be able to stimulate the microbial life, the vegetative life, the livestock life, or maintain the human life. So it's critically important, and we're leveraging our tools as much as we can to help producers engage in more water-smart activities on their land, up to and including CREP agreements in your state as well to recharge the aquifer through the playa system there. So I think we can continue to work towards that by first taking the step that you offered, acknowledging water is every bit as important as any of the other things that we're talking about.
Yeah. Ms. Coleman, anything to add? As I think about this, what was the old saying back home is that whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting.
Well, clearly, water is just as essential to the health and resiliency of forest as any other part of our natural resource base. And so our investments in watershed health are critical, and they play a role as well in our strategy to combat what we're seeing from the effects of climate. So we're in total agreement around the vitality of water and our commitment to invest in watershed health. That is critical, and that's one of the bases for the Forest Service.
Madam Chair, then I just want to, we don't have to answer the question, but we still don't have a state conservationist officer appointed in Kansas yet. Hopefully we can accommodate that. I am hearing a lot right now from my producers that we're overworking our NRCS officers as well, that they have more and more territory to cover. It'll be a challenge as we introduce all these new programs. We'll have to make sure that we address that. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you, Chair, for holding this important hearing. And I think you know that Minnesota has always ranked in the top 5 for conservation program enrollment and spending. It's very important to us and our farmers. But before I get to that, I wanted to talk about timber. Ms. Coleman, in the last 2 farm bills, 2014 and 2018, I worked to expand the Good Neighbor authority that gives the Forest Service additional flexibility to work with willing state and private landowners to implement forest management practices. It has been a resounding success, and I believe further expansion of the program in the Farm Bill can help us manage additional acres of forest. How do you feel the Good Neighbor Authority is working, besides it having a nice name? And what options should the committee consider to prioritize new projects and agreements between the Forest Service and the states?
Senator, thank you for the question. And I think based on what we're seeing, it's living up to its name in promoting good neighbor relationships and getting work done together. The addition of the authority to extend to tribes and counties has been very beneficial, and we have about a little more than a half dozen on each side of that. And when we look at the future of the Good Neighbor Authority, which has really delivered 380 projects, 38 states. Clearly, we're benefiting from the sharing of expertise and capacity. So when we look at the future, we want to look for opportunities to explore opportunities to incentivize even more county and tribal participation.
Excellent. And as you know, that also helps to reduce wildfire risk. We had 10 forest fires in the month of July alone, last July in northern Minnesota. I went and visited with the Forest Service, Senator Smith and I did, and the governor to see their work. And luckily, the local fire departments responded, but it further helps on that front as well. On the conservation front, we know that farmers, Chief Crosby, Administrator Ducheneau, increasingly interested in soil health. Senator Thune and I reintroduced legislation to improve the use of conservation data analysis so that farmers can identify the most effective conservation techniques that have the greatest benefit. Can you talk, maybe Chief, about the importance of having studies that compare yield rates to rates of cover crop and no-till adoption or other conservation practices, so when making decisions?
Senator, thank you for the question. And I had an opportunity to visit your state last week and was there with the state conservationist Troy Daniels.
I'm sure the weather was lovely for you there,
It was
Chief
lovely.
Crosby.
It was. I was looking for a coat and a hat real quick. But, you know, the question is very important. You know, we need to analyze a lot of data to make sure that these programs are working for the farmer and the producer. We have a team there at NRCS and across USDA that helps to look at a lot of these different things as the data comes in. How is it useful? How should we use it? How should it support the programs? And so we're working very hard to do that. You know, I've been doing this for a long time, and we have a lot of data from a lot of years. You know, we do SEEP studies. We're going to be doing a lot of remote sensing. We're going to be working with our our soils assessment team to be looking at how this data could work. And so the teams are working very hard to look at that.
Okay, thank you, Chief Cosby. Senator Thune and I also introduced the CRP Improvement Act, Administrator Ducheneau, which provides cost share opportunities for grazing infrastructure, an increase in the CRP annual payment limitation, and permanently establishes the state acres for wildlife enhancement practice under continuous CRP. Would these provisions incentivize producers to enroll in the program? How can we capitalize on this tool and make it more desirable for farmers and ranchers?
Thank you, Senator. And I think the more we can do to incentivize participation is naturally going to drive more producers to it. But I think the important aspect that you really highlighted there is using CRP as a working lands tool and providing the tools that producers need to continue to produce, but in a different way on these CRP lands. They've been a vital resource in our part of the country in emergencies in the last couple of years, for instance. Emergency haying and grazing of CRP lands has literally kept cow herds together for producers that have CRP and producers that are neighbors or in the region of CRP areas.
Okay, very good. I think I'm out of time, but I'll ask the other questions on the record. I want to thank all of you for your good work and look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Tuberville.
I'll yield my time to Senator Grassley if he's ready.
Senator Grassley.
I've always been nice to him.
Well, that's actually a smart thing to do.
Especially when it comes to agriculture, you know.
That's right. All right.
But we're not talking about
I'm only
ethanol
going to take
today.
you up on your offer because you're so mean to me.
Senator Grassley.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this hearing comes at a critical time because of Russia's influence on the world's supply of grain. All the while, the Biden administration is taking action to take more American farmland out of production. A week into this term of this president, he issued an executive order known by 30 by 30 plan. This plan aims to permanently conserve 30% of our country's lands and waters by 2030. Have you been involved in the discussion on the 30-30 executive order, and if so, has CRP been a topic of these meetings?
Thank you, Senator Grassley, for the question. We've all been part of the effort to ensure that we are doing our part to ensure conservation on our lands. And it's conservation of the lands that will reserve future production opportunity that we're focused on. It's not about forever removing it from conservation. We're even doing analyses right now about how do we better use land that's already in the CRP program so that we can continue to have some meaningful ag production while taking the conservation steps that will build soil health and improve our ability to continue to grow our production into the future.
CRP's been a part of that top discussion.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Okay. The 2018 Farm Bill capped CRP payments at 85% of county rental rates. Yet during the 2021 CRP sign-up, USDA added a 10% inflation adjustment for contracts signed and other environmental incentives. This increases the chance of the federal government is outbidding young and beginning cash rent farmers, so the federal government would be a very disastrous competitor. CRP can be a useful tool to address marginal land. However, Iowa has the most productive farmland, and we should not be putting that in permanent conservation. Did FSA take into account how this inflationary adjustment would affect land prices and push producers trying to get access to rental land?
Yes, sir. In addition to a lot of other factors, FSA considers those economic impacts, but I think it's important to note that we lean heavily on our local partners on the county committees to weigh in when they feel like the NAS data is incorrect as to what an effective rate would be. And we make sure that when we get close to that 25% per county cap, we're paying special attention in those cases, sir.
Yeah. Did you take into consideration that you'd be violating law if that inflationary cap got over the 85% county average?
We work very closely with our Office of General Counsel, sir, and I would ask you to have the legal conversations with them. We adhere to their guidance.
Can you explain how prime farmland ends up in CRP and what we can do in the next farm bill to ensure that we're only setting aside the most environmentally sensitive and marginal farmland?
I think that's our goal, sir, is to ensure that it's the environmentally sensitive land. And as to explaining how prime farmland can get into that program, I think we got to look at the causal factors. The economic reality of our producers is that 89% of them make most of their income off the farm. So we've got to look at improving farm viability for all of our producers, and a rental rate for CRP is one of the many opportunities that a producer has to consider when measuring the economic viability of their operation. But we welcome those conversations, sir.
Before I give up the chair, let me explain to Senator Tuberville, you really aren't mean, but you sure tease me an awful lot.
For the record, all right. So, okay, and Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate the time today. And Tommy, you're okay, sir. Don't let them give you a hard time. You're a good guy. I want to thank all of our panelists for being here today, for the work that you're doing and that you will continue to do. My questioning today is predominantly around small rural areas. In New Mexico, as you know, we have a lot of small communities, towns, farmers, ranchers that do well, but they want to participate more in USDA programs. And initiatives like Justice 40, they're a good start and they're a good first step. But one of the challenges that producers in New Mexico have identified is cost share challenges along those lines. I'm having the same conversation around the Colorado River and some of the small, historically underserved and disadvantaged communities. Mr. Dishno, has the Justice 40 initiative reviewed how cost share requirements prevent low-income and underserved communities from accessing conservation programs?
Yes, we have, sir, and we've done some other studies, and thanks for the question. I had a chance to visit some of the acequia producers, as I mentioned, in the last hearing, and you've heard me talk a lot in this hearing about the value of our Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. That was one of the first efforts that we made to get that out there with the acequia producers as an assistance tool to help them participate more meaningfully, gives them a fast track into the conservation programs. The other report that I was referring to is the Minority, Non-Minority Participation Report, and that report very clearly indicates that, I'm talking too louder in the wrong place, but that report very clearly indicates that having an increased cost share incentivizes production. When you take a look at minority participation, historically underserved participation in our programs, the higher cost share rates matter and drive participation. So I think that's going to be a critical tool as we go forward to explore how do we get to the folks that don't have that opportunity, haven't had the chance to amass that generational wealth that makes a cost share easy to pay. That's one of our tools that we're going to need to use, sir.
And Madam Chair, this is an area where I hope that, especially with smaller producers across the country, that we evaluate how this will benefit them as well. And that's one of the goals that I had coming to this committee, as I shared with you and with our ranking member as well. So I look forward to working with you on technical assistance and then working with the committee and see if we can earn support for improvements through the Farm Bill as well. And since I have you, sir, I appreciate you mentioning acequias. That's a good thing. Now the knowledge is deep. More people are talking about these, and you've seen them and know them. For those of you that have not seen them, I'm going to invite you all to New Mexico to my little farm, and you're going to help me dig them and keep them clean, so that way we keep them running for a long time. But you did something as well that was important in this administration. There were some predominantly Hispanic producers in northern New Mexico who, under the previous FSA, had been getting the runaround, did not get support to qualify for NAP. But one of the areas was the local FSA office stated and moved something that said, if you irrigated with these acequias, you will not qualify for NAP. You fixed that. And this is another area, Madam Chair, that this change is critically important, and I'm hoping that we can work together to codify that change because it's a good one, and this injustice should never happen again. Now, from a wildfire perspective, as we know, New Mexico was hit terribly with the largest wildfires we've had in our state's history. And I'll address this to the entire panel and ask each of you, what changes do you feel need to be made to USDA disaster programs to get resources out the door faster and better support our communities in need? Mr. Cosby?
Thank you, sir, and thank you for the question. I had the opportunity to be in New Mexico several times during this devastation, and our heart just goes out to those folks that experienced this. And, you know, working with FSA and the federal family, we've looked at how do we make sure that when this type thing happens that we're readily available, we're on the ground. Internally, we've talked about teams that we've put together or that will be put together to respond to a disaster like this. Now, one of the things that NRCS did was we put together 3 different teams out there, and we had them out on each farm. I think we did about 400 of these investigations, or we were on 400 farms to look at the resource need that those folks needed right away to get them back up and going. From a conservation standpoint. And so it's really important that all of the federal family is working together. USDA worked together real closely to do this with the Forest Service, with FSA, and all of the federal family. And like I said, I also had an opportunity to be at the executives and talk to a lot of folks. Paula Garcia and we've talked several times about this and how we could make sure that we streamline these programs. They have to be streamlined so that when these type thing happens, folks can immediately get assistance. And so we're looking at how do we take down those barriers to make sure that happen.
I appreciate that. Madam Chair, since my time's expired, I'll ask the other 2 experts here to submit their responses into the record. And the last thing that I'll share here is just with you, because I appreciate the attention that you've all given here. There's some areas where I can't thank enough my colleagues for supporting the program that's providing support to these communities as well. It's come to my attention that there's some support USDA can offer and others that maybe are pointed towards FEMA, things of that nature. Look, this fire was started by the federal government. When one federal agency says to us, well, this is the other federal agency's priority or it's their business, that's not good. This was started by the federal government. The federal government needs to help. And if there's challenges legally or statutorily that prevents you from doing it, please let me know or let us know so we can fix it. Because in the end, families need that help. And that's all I'm going to ask there. But appreciate what you've been doing, and you're always welcome in New Mexico. Look forward to having you back. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you, Senator Lujan. Thank you for being such a strong advocate in this area where we need to make sure this is done right. So thank you. Now, Senator Tupperville.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thanks for the witnesses being here today, especially Ms. Coleman, who is an Alabama native and a Troy University graduate. So thank you for being here. You know, today's significant for my state of Alabama because farming and forestry combine to make up the largest industry in the state. Alabama has 23.1 million acres of forest, 94% of which are owned by private landowners, which is important. We also have 4 national forests and 4 state forests. For our forests to thrive, we must manage and harvest our timber. For our farms to continue producing food for the world, we must keep working forest and farmland in production. Our farmers and foresters are true conservationists that have been implementing and will continue to implement sustainable practices that benefit our environment for generations to come. We must ensure conservation programs remain voluntarily, market-driven, and incentive-based. Each producer must remain in charge of what operations occur within their farmland and forest land. Mandates on our producers will not be entertained to any degree. As we consider this costly $1.4 trillion farm bill and the $25 billion in Inflation Reduction Act spending for forestry and conservation programs, we must recognize the price tag of these programs, their damage to our national debt, and the effect of government incentives to take working forest and farmland out of production. So, that being said, I can't believe that we've been going through this hearing for so long and hadn't talked about feral hogs. Mr. Cosby, I can't go anywhere with farmers and foresters that stay after me about having their crops and their land destroyed. 2018 Farm Bill included $75 million in feral swine eradication and control pilot program. How can we implement this better and do better, and do we need more money in the Farm Bill to help with this?
Thank you for the question, Senator. We've been working very closely with our friends at APHIS to look at this problem, and we've been providing incentives also for this. Now, one of the things is that our incentives go for a certain thing. You know, we don't eradicate, we don't do those type things, but we can help with technologies and how do you get rid of these things, and we've heard this all over. I'm from the state of Mississippi. We have the same issue with feral hogs, and we just need to do a better job of the technology to trap them, and what happens to them after that, who knows. But yes, we do need to work very closely with the federal family to figure out how do we do this, because it is devastating when you go out and you look at a field that it's been turned over overnight, or if a farmer loses all of the alfalfa or whatever has been planted there. So yeah, it is a problem. It is something that we need to talk about. How do we aid the farmers in fixing it?
Do you think we need more money in the Farm Bill for this?
So the money that we've gotten so far, we've effectively used, and so we'll look at other areas and other ways and see if there is more money available to put towards this.
Because it is a huge problem and getting worse. It's getting worse. Got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think we have to empower producers to consider their production systems that allow these type of species to propagate. Senator Thune will be familiar with the conditions around Lake Oahe, where we've got the ebb and flow of the lake that creates bare ground, where we get Canada thistle by the hundreds of acres. But because of some of the work that we've done in our grassland ecosystems, Canada thistle can't find a home in those ecosystems because that ecosystem is resilient. So as we help deal with the symptom, we've got to help producers understand the greater system that they're working in and provide them opportunities to adjust that production to eliminate that environment that's conducive for the feral hogs.
Thank you. Ms. Coleman, because forestry is so important to our state, I want to be sure it's protected. In the South, insects and disease like the southern pine beetle and pine decline can decimate pine tree species. How is the Forest Service monitoring and preparing for outbreaks that could decimate our critical forest resources?
Thank you so much for the question, Senator. We have a very active, in our state and private forestry program, very active pest management group, and certainly we've all seen the devastation of the southern pine beetle and other pests throughout the country, and climate change has only ramped up the effects. And so there was support and funding from recent legislation that really helps us to deliver, and Farm Bill authority that helps us deliver much more effective monitoring and eradication or at least response to those infestations. So clearly, it's very much a part of our forest health work in the agency, and it's also a contributor to our overall strategy when it comes to resilience in healthy forests.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, I got a couple of questions I'd like to submit for the record.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Senator Gillibrand.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. To start off, I'd like to talk about PFAS. PFAS are man-made forever chemicals that are used in industry and consumer products and can lead to serious health effects. Contamination of our soil and water has prevented some farms from selling their products, creating financial hardship for some affected family members. Chief Cosby, what is Natural Resource Conservation Service doing to assist farmers with testing their soil and water for PFAS? And how can Congress help you with this work in our upcoming Farm Bill?
Thank you for the question. And again, we've been working very closely together as a USDA to understand PFAS and the effects that it has on soils, on plants, and those type things. And so what our team has been doing is looking at how do we mitigate that? How do we use our conservation programs, our practices to do that? And so there'll be research going into that to try to figure that out. And by all means, we're not the experts on chemicals. And so we'll be working very closely with our sister agencies to understand this. And through our programs, we want to provide solutions to those producers that are experiencing this, because we know it's devastating, especially on dairies and some of those things.
So one idea that I'd love you to consider and respond to, you can respond in writing, is if a family farm has PFAS contaminated land and it needs to be remediated by the EPA, so you would obviously be in collaboration with the EPA, is there a way to remove land from production in the same way that we remove land for conservation so that we can get a tax benefit? So for example, in the same way when you put land and get tax benefits because you give it to Forever Farm or Forever Wild, you can get tax benefits. It would be very wise if we could also remove chemically laden pieces of property into a brownfield site for remediation and to give the farmers a benefit for doing that, since they're losing the production ability on that farm and they did not create the PFAS chemicals.
Yes, ma'am. We'd be really interested in having those conversations with you and your team.
That would be great. My next question is about science, technology, and innovation, and how important that is to American farmers, especially fruit and vegetable producers, to meet the growing demand for healthy food in the face of supply chain disruptions and climate change. The innovative technologies being developed and deployed by controlled environment agriculture producers are but a few of the critical tools we have to help indoor and outdoor growers accomplish these objectives. How can the USDA's Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production help more producers invest and incorporate these technologies and systems, which are extremely capital intensive and often not eligible for support under existing programs?
Thank you for the question, and we really want to thank the committee for adding this in the 2018 Farm Bill. We've been able to establish this Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production, and we have a new director there now. And we've been able to do a lot of things out in the urban setting. You know, I was the state conservationist in Ohio, and we worked very closely in the urban areas to look at this. And we saw a lot of this during the pandemic, the food, disruption. People want to grow local and buy local.
Yep.
So how do we help them do that? And then vertical farming is also something that's, I think, is taken off, and we have a lot of abandoned buildings and different things where people can do this type work. And so we're going to be continuing looking at all the new technologies. We've offered some innovation grants out there for folks that want to do this work. We're learning a lot from that, and we're going to continue to offer that and learn from this new technology.
Thank you. And Madam Chairwoman and Mr. Ranking Member, one issue that was just raised to me when I was talking to constituents is that our rural broadband money is allowed to go to the farm, but not allowed to go to the businesses. So one thing we should look at is when we're talking about technology and innovation, the actual ag businesses need the same access, and so maybe figure out how to make sure. I didn't think it was true, but some farmers ran into this trouble. And so I'd like to do a deep dive when we do, to make sure all ag businesses have access to technology, high-speed internet, that we can make sure it applies. And you could do it for any ag business. So make it much more ag business related as opposed to just getting to the rural areas, the family farm. Because I got that feedback, which I did not realize. Thank you both. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your testimony, and thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Mr. Ranking Member.
Thank you, and thank you for raising that issue. I really would want to follow up. That doesn't sound right to me, so if there's a problem, we can, yes, so.
In his statement that some of these can go to different types of urban farming, that might be another way to use the rural broadband money to just make sure access is there for all farm businesses.
Great idea. Senator Thune, and then I'm turning the gavel over to Senator Bozeman. I have to step out, and this is true bipartisanship, so I'm turning it over to Senator Bozeman. Don't go crazy, okay? All right, Senator Thune.
We'll have passed the Farm Bill by the time you get back, yeah. So, thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member Bozeman for holding today's hearing on two very important titles of the Farm Bill, conservation and forestry. And I want to thank the USDA witnesses, Administrator Ducheneau, it's nice to have you back here, and fellow South Dakotan. Let me just start by talking a little bit about the Black Hills National Forest and other forests that provide recreational opportunities and contribute significantly to local and regional economies. In the last few years, we've seen enormous wildfires across the West, which have been devastating to the local communities, and that will have lasting effects on water quality, wildlife, recreation, and tourism. Proper forest management plays a critical role in maintaining forest health and reducing the threat of catastrophic wildfires. The forest products industry has been a reliable partner in the proper management of the Black Hills National Forest, but the Black Hills is at risk of losing additional milling capacity due to the lack of timber available. The Forest Service has failed to appropriately manage the forest's timber sale program, and I urge the agency to prioritize staff and resources to conduct the National Environmental Policy Act analysis necessary for timber sales. The Forest Service must also consider expanding the suitable base of acres available for timber and significantly increase its collaboration with the states of South Dakota and Wyoming and industry stakeholders to find other ways to support the timber sale program. And I want to urge the Forest Service to work collaboratively with state and local governments and the Black Hills National Forest Advisory Board throughout the forest plan revision process to come up with a plan that appropriately supports the future management and health of the forest and the communities that depend upon it. So, Associate Chief Coleman, let me just ask, what actions is the Forest Service taking to proactively maintain the health of the forest and to avoid these any additional mill closures?
Thank you so much for the question, Senator Thune, and we really can't agree more. We need a healthy, viable infrastructure with wood production to go after the work that needs to be done in these priority places. No question about that. And we have been working hard to figure out what the opportunities are volume-wise in the Black Hills to add a reliable supply of wood products to keep those mills open. And we had that third-party review, and it looks clear that we are going to have additional volume, and now we're actually focusing in on the specifics of that using LiDAR technology, and expect by the end of the year to have very much more clear information about how we can ramp up our suitable timber production, suitable base for timber production. So it is clear that we are doing what we can and to expedite that. We did do a relook to, and we do believe that there's more volume to keep these mills open. And we do, again, recognize these pieces have to work together. We have to have viable timber industry. We have to have a viable economy as well as a strong community. And we think that we're going to do our part. We know we're going to do our part to do that. And we're going to use all authorities available to us to go after this work.
Thank you. And I would just encourage you to improve collaboration with the advisory board, the counties, the states, who I think have a wealth of information and insight to bring to the table when it comes to the plan revision process. And let me just ask a quick question, and that is, will the Forest Service commit to a more timely renewal process for the advisory board moving forward?
We will be happy to work with you on that, Senator, and make sure that we are that our commitment is really clear. So obviously, we want to strengthen our relationships with the advisory board. It's played a very important role for us, and so we would be happy to continue conversations about how we do that.
Yeah. Administrator Ducheneau, as you know, CRP program plays a critical role in conserving marginal lands and providing wildlife habitat, and I'm going to continue to work to make the program a more effective working lands-oriented option for producers in the next Farm Bill, including through haying and grazing flexibility. Livestock grazing on CRP acres can be a particularly effective option because it can be done earlier in the year while maintaining wildlife habitat. And there was a provision in the 2018 Farm Bill that I secured to allow cost-share assistance for the establishment of grazing infrastructure like fencing and water distribution on CRP acres, but I'm concerned USDA has been too restrictive on providing this assistance. And we've got a bill, and I understand Senator Klobuchar asked some questions about this already, so I think you're on the record on that. I won't belabor that point, but let me just ask what what else can be done to better leverage the multiple use benefits of CRP to support producers, soil health, and wildlife habitat.
Sir, if I may, real quick, the answer I shared with Senator Klobuchar, that if we can enhance the usability of these working lands, it further incentivizes producers to get in. And as a livestock guy myself, I like to see livestock on the landscape because I'm aware of the soil health benefits that we get that can accelerate the reason for putting it in CRP and taking it out of the production it's in already. We welcome conversations with you and your staff about flexibilities you feel we have that we're not extending. Those are some of my favorite conversations that I've had the fortune to have here.
Okay. Well, and we will look for ways to better target the enrollment of a lot of these marginal, environmentally sensitive acres into the program, and welcome your input on that. But it's an important program that does offer benefits, lots of benefits, and I think there are ways that we can utilize it to make it even a stronger program, more efficient one, and one that offers significant value. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Senator Welsh.
Thank you very much for the hearing. I want to thank all of the witnesses. You could do great work. It's nice to be on this committee where everybody thinks you're doing great work. I represent Vermont, small state, small farms, and I have a number of questions for you, Mr. Cosby. You know, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program in Vermont is successful, but inaccessible in practical ways for some of our smaller farmers, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. We've got a great program with the $26 million that we've received since 2015 from the USDA for the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. One of the challenges is that application process, and you were talking about that with one of my colleagues. And the question that I have on a very granular level is how do we make that somewhat more accessible, especially to smaller farmers? And how do we deal with the necessity to reduce requirements on our smaller farms or allow more grant funding to be used for technical assistance? The program's there, but it just is a little bit too much for it to be accessible to small farmers. It may as well not exist. So can you answer that and what you're doing to try to make it more accessible?
Senator, thank you for your question. And RCPP has been one of those programs that we've heard a lot about. And we are looking at how do we streamline it from top to bottom. In the 2014 Farm Bill, I had one of the first in the state of Ohio to work with Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan. And we were able to sit down and negotiate with the partner the terms of the agreement. And it was a simple process. And I think from that time, things have got more complicated. So we're looking at how do we go back and make this less complicated and make sure that folks are able to participate, because it is pretty popular. We did what we call alternative funding arrangements last year. We started with those where we're able to work with entities and say that, hey, you run this. We'll put that money out there for you to run this program. You work with the producers, and then we just,
So like who are you working with on that?
Well, we did this on some of the tribal lands. And it worked very well, and we're going to look at how we expand that. I think we also need to look at how do we move this more to a grants program.
Right.
Than a programmatic one.
So where are you
we're
at on
looking
that?
We are very close. We are working through it. I think when you see this next announcement or RCPP, there will be greater opportunities for grants.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about succession planning. It's just brutal for everybody. This isn't unique to Vermont, obviously, but a farmer has all his or her equity, family equity in the farm, in the land. There comes time they got to retire. Average age for us in Vermont is 56. And getting access to turn it over to younger farmers is really tough. What can we do about that, given the market realities and the legitimate retirement concerns of the folks who have been farming that land for a long time?
And I'll start off, and I'll let my colleague here talk about that also. And I'm from a family farm, and I understand the generational want to pass it down. And so I had to leave the farm as a kid because there was just nothing there. And so we have what we call the Beginning Farm and Rancher program, and we've been really trying to make it more accessible to a lot of our folks, and that is under our underserved community category. And so we've been doing that.
But, let me just interrupt. It's underserved is more, it's really tough for anybody, right? I mean, the price of land is real high, and whoever's trying to get in is going to have a real challenge. So just concretely, what can we do to help those younger farmers all across the country get access to the farmland they need?
I think it starts, like I said, Mr. Ducheneau here will help me with this, but I think it starts with both of our agencies is how do we get them through that process, and then how do we afford to apply these conservation practices once they're in. And so we know this we've seen the price of land go up, and so how do we do that? So I'll kick it over to my colleague here.
Thank you, Senator Welch. If I may, so there's two parts to this. One, we've got the Conservation Reserve Program, and it's got a transition incentives program that's designed to put that next generation in touch with the previous generation that's got the Conservation Reserve Program contract in the waning years of that contract. The idea there is we can build a linkage. We're studying how we can improve that. But access to capital is critical, and if a producer has to wait months to get not enough money from us, they're never going to have that opportunity. So we need to continue to look at what we can do in the realm of providing thoughtful, timely financing for those young and beginning producers to be ready for that transition, because right now our tools do not work for the auction sale. They only work for that closely held generational transfer. And we need to position our young and beginning farmers in a way that they have that opportunity when the opportunity is there. It's a once in a lifetime deal.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Braun.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is something dear to me because I am one of the few, I think, on the committee that has been deeply involved in farming as a sideline activity, and first of all, as a tree farmer. And I just got a couple hundred trees in, 100 white oak and 100 walnut that I'm going to plant over the next month, and fell in love with forestry, very underestimated in the total ag picture. For some reason, that doesn't get easily kind of discussed in the agricultural conversation. The thing I hear most about, and I'd like all three of you to weigh in to the extent you're familiar with the issue, is waters of the U.S. I'm one that believes that we got to keep our waterways clean. I've been involved in the climate discussion since I've been here as a conservationist. I know what farmers do to be the best stewards of the land out there, and generally they practice on their own and with the help of state and the federal government. But I had a dust up right after I got here in my own county, where we had the Indiana Department of Environmental Management and the Department of Natural Resources, through the enforcement side of it, kind of chasing farmers down on the back 40 when it would have been a waste of time. This was ditch maintenance in places where ditches hardly had any water in them. We've been getting the kind of football passed to and from on the WOTUS ruling, and currently now it's going back to, I guess, what it was in 2015. Farmers and developers, farmers have a tough enough job to be worried about, some of that. They'd like clarity, and it needs to be practical as well. So weigh in on what you think will happen there, whether you agree with the rule being put back to 2015, or if you thought it made more sense where the Trump rule took it to but never got implemented. Start with you, Mr. Cosby.
Senator, thank you for the question. And we've been one of the folks that have been sitting at the table with the discussion about how this to happen. NRCS role in all of this is doing wetland compliance and also doing those reviews for farmers to keep them in the program. And our folks do a very effective job of that. We did close to 54,000 wetland determinations and also compliance reviews last year. And so we are out there working with the producer hand in hand to make sure they understand these rules, and also
And are you still working off the 2015 rule then, because nothing else had really been fully implemented? Is that correct? Where are we at on how you're implementing a rule that even most farmers are confused with because it gets reset and then not re-implemented.
Well, yeah, I know about the 2015 rule, but there's been work underway to look at this new rule. And so we look at the new rule now, and we work very closely with the agency to do that. And so, like I said, we are working with farmers and producers to make sure we're doing those determinations to keep them farming and keep them in the programs.
Okay.
Thank you for the question, Senator. We believe in the farmer and rancher and their inclination to preserve the resource for future generations. Water quality is one of them. It's a conversation we've had here quite a little today already. And our goal is to continue to provide the voluntary incentive-based tools to help farmers improve that water quality through buffer strips, through better nutrient management, improve soil health so that the water can go into the ground instead of run by it. That's where we need it. We need to recharge our aquifers. Without the water in the ground, it's not going to be able to.
And agree with all that. And do you think the new rule is a better place for farmers and ranchers than where the Trump rule would have been, you know, back at the tail end? I think that was just done in literally October, November of 2020. Which rule do you think is more practical? Because the feedback I'm getting from farmers, not so much ranchers, is that this is going to be more cumbersome with a lot more red tape with not the marginal benefits from it.
That's not a rule that we live with on a day-to-day basis, sir. We're delivering the programs to the producers, not enforcing environmental rules.
Sir, I'm going to defer to my colleagues on this since this is an interest that is focused on ag production.
So, got a little remaining time. I'll ask you on the biggest thing impacting anyone investing in timber ground currently would be invasive species. We just literally lost 8 to 10% of our total hardwood population with the emerald ash borer. And now you've got stilt grass, you've got all other kinds, and most tree farmers that are even somewhat sophisticated don't really know if it's invasive or not. How much attention are we paying to that? Because to me, I live it every day, and when I go back on the weekends, and it looks like it's almost a problem that is so bad that we'll never get it under control.
Sir, when it comes to invasive species, they figure just as much into the effects of climate as all these other stressors we're talking about. And the agency's paying a lot of attention. We have a very robust invasive species program, a forest health program that resides in our state and private programs to work with landowners, forest owners in particular, because we're seeing it too. And it really does, getting our hands around that, being responsive to that is just as critical to our resiliency in our forests as any of our other authorities that we use under the Farm Bill.
Thank you.
Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Appreciate it. Thanks to our witnesses for being here. Chief Cosby, do you agree that farm conservation programs should be voluntary, farmer-friendly, and focus on locally led projects?
I do, sir.
Okay, yeah, that was kind of an easy one. No on that one would have been a problem. Okay, so RCPP, PL 560, a number of these programs, you need to get some more flexibility in those things. You can leverage them and do more if you would provide more flexibility in those programs. I just had a roundtable out in North Dakota. We talked about that, and you're dealing with a lot of different folks, not only the farmers and the ranchers, but your county commissions, your water districts, and all these kind of, and they come up with good ideas. And we'll be submitting a bunch of those as we do the Farm Bill markup. And if you provide flexibility, I think you could do a lot more with RCPP, and I think make a big impact. What's your reaction to that?
So we, as we work through these programs, we're looking at all the flexibilities, all the authorities that we have, and also how do we tear down barriers to participation in these programs. And so it's something that we talk about constantly on a daily basis, and how do we make these programs more accessible.
Yeah, I think you have opportunity there, and hopefully we can help you with some tools
On your carbon capture programs, your CO2 programs, same thing. You got to have flexibility. Can't be a one-size-fits-all. Farming in South Dakota, as a guy sitting next to you, and ranching, is different in South Dakota and North Dakota than it is in Alabama or Georgia. Big surprise. Some places till, some places have no till. There's a ton of different crops. You've got to provide flexibility if you're going to make sure that those carbon capture programs are farmer-friendly. What's your reaction to that?
And sir, that's where the locally led process is so important. As we look around the country, and those folks are out there working in those local conditions, identifying what those local resource concerns are, and we'll be working through that system to make sure that we're looking at everything across this country. But the locally led process is important.
And our ranking member here and the chairwoman did, I think, a pretty good job in terms of moving forward on the CO2 issue with parameters for USDA, and then the private market working with the farmer and rancher rather than a big federal program sucking up all the Farm Bill resources, which we're going to need for countercyclical safety net. What's your reaction to that?
I think the countercyclical safety net is more of a FSA thing, so I think I'll turn to my colleague here.
No, he's next. You got to.
Okay, yeah, all right, sir.
He gets his chance. This is yours.
Right. As I said before, we will use all the authorities that we have to make sure these programs are flexible and they're locally led. Because, as you said, one size doesn't fit all, and farming across this country varies in difference from state to state. And so we're going to continue to do that and make sure that we're opening these programs for all folks that like to participate.
Okay, Administrator Ducheneau. First off, thanks for all your work at FSA, for your strong leadership, for the flexibility and the help you've given folks throughout cattle country and farm country. We really appreciate your can-do problem-solving attitude. But now, if you want to tackle that last question, go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Hoeven. It's good to see you, and I'm only slightly offended that I didn't get invited to the roundtable in North Dakota. I thought I was.
Oh, we should have. It was really good. Yeah, you're right.
You know, I just want to challenge, sir, respectfully, the notion of a federal program or a federal government soaking up resources. Our staff work tirelessly and poorly compensated to do this work. And when we let things go like that and float out in the air without pushing back on the good work of our staff in our county offices, doing it at a rate of pay where oftentimes they're eligible for food assistance, we really have to think about the efficiency that those folks use when they deliver programs. They do it for pennies on the dollar, and we've got to make sure that we make our staff know that we appreciate that work and don't feel like they're part of a greater bureaucracy that's taking resources from them, sir.
Yeah, I know you get it, and we actually want to get you out for some more roundtables and continue the kind of work we've been doing.
Yes, sir.
Both on the farm side, but also to get some of these assistance programs that our cattle guys need included in a Farm Bill. Tester and I have some amendments bipartisan to do that, and we'll work closely with you on those and get your input. And with the indulgence of the ranking member, I'll just finish with the Joint Chiefs Partnership Program, and this is for Associate Chief Coleman. Senator Bennett of Colorado and I worked to pass our Joint Chiefs Landscape Restoration Partnership Act. It's really important in these areas where you've got a checkerboard of private interests, maybe Native American, BLM, Forest Service, and it's checkerboarded. And the whole point of that Joint Chiefs program is so you all work together to help our farmers and ranchers out there, because it's tough to navigate all that. And we want to make sure that that program continues, and we want your commitment to support it.
We support it, sir.
And Zach, or Administrator, I know you do as well, so thank you for that.
Absolutely. Look forward to working together, sir.
Chief?
Yes, sir. We really support that, and it's a great partnership between the two chiefs on the Joint Chiefs.
Again, thanks to all three of you. Appreciate it. Thank you,
Okay, Senator Fisher is recognized, and she also is going to take over. The only thing we've got to do around here is vote, and they're calling us and telling us to get over there. So thank you all for being here. I think I can speak on behalf of myself and Senator Stabenow. I really appreciate you all in the sense that you're very close to the people that you serve, you and the people that work for you. So we do appreciate your efforts and look forward to working with you in the future. And I'm going to be in North Dakota in the not too distant future, and maybe you can sneak over there then, and
Yeah, again.
we'll harangue you over there. So,
Great to have you.
thank you, Senator Fisher. Likewise.
Thank you, Senator Bozeman, and thank you to the panel for being here today. Nebraska has experienced a significant number of disasters since the 2018 Farm Bill, including historic flooding in 2019, as well as wildfires over the last several years. The Emergency Conservation Program is meant to help our producers in times like these, yet I've heard about challenges for producers utilizing that program. In 2021, after wildfires in western Nebraska, producers were denied ECP because the source of the fire was yet to be determined, even though the spread of the fire was due to drought and to extreme wind. I've also had farmers write in about ECP saying that paperwork was too burdensome in a time of disaster. They're trying to recover. They're not trying to fill out all this paperwork. Unfortunately, these producers stated that they would absorb the losses and try to move on. It was based on this type of feedback from Nebraskans that I worked with Senator Lujan to introduce the ECP Improvement Act to help expedite relief to producers. Mr. Duchesneau, I'm glad to see in your testimony that USDA has begun making advance ECP payments available up to 25% of the cost for restoration activities. My bill would build upon this by increasing the amount of advance payment a producer could receive up front. Can you discuss how implementation for advance payments of ECP has gone and how they have been helpful to producers?
Thank you, Senator. It's a fairly new development, so we don't have a lot of data and feedback on it, but producers are in favor of that. The challenge that we have with the ECP program, as you mentioned, there are some boxes we have to check in the delivery of those services, and really what comes to mind for me is if we had a functional emergency loan program where a producer could come in and say, I want to leverage my next 5 years production against repairing this while I go through that process to get the ECP that can then help out with the loan. We've got an emergency loan program that doesn't really allow for that yet. So I think that's an opportunity to make those two programs fit better together. The advance payment, of course, is a critical part, but we still have to make sure that we're being respectful for the local environmental and cultural concerns that may exist, so the work can't necessarily commence below the plow line on those type of projects. We look forward to working with you on those solutions.
Do you have any other ideas on thinking outside the box on how we can streamline that to get those payments out earlier? You know, we can increase the percentage of the payments that can go out earlier. You know, I hear a lot of people, you wait 2 years to get a payment, and some people are out of business by then.
Yes, ma'am. And I think we need to contemplate the cost of a producer not jumping into this program and weigh that against the other concerns that we have to evaluate as we deliver the program. Because if we aren't able to help a producer in their time of need, they're not going to look to the other valuable forward-thinking conservation tools that are going to help them be better positioned to mitigate the next disaster themselves. So we have to really contemplate the cost of exclusion like we need to in all of our programs for those producers and our underserved producers all across the country.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cosby, last year the Inflation Reduction Act was passed without any input from Republicans from this committee or elsewhere, and it appropriated large amounts of funding toward traditionally bipartisan conservation programs. Notably, the IRA funding departed from bipartisan parameters the 2018 Farm Bill laid out on how funding for these conservation programs must be spent. In Nebraska, livestock production is the largest segment of agriculture. One of the most popular conservation programs for livestock producers is EQIP. The IRA waived a requirement of at least 50% for that funding be made available for practices related to livestock production. The IRA also placed a large focus on carbon and greenhouse gas emission reduction, but ignored other priority resources concerns that this committee has agreed on in the last Farm Bill, such as addressing water quantity and drought concerns. Mr. Cosby, without the requirement for USDA to spend at least 50% of IRA-equipped funds on practices targeting livestock production, what percent of funding do you expect to go for livestock producers?
Well, it's something that we'll be looking at. You know, we just rolled this program IRA out. You know, we in the 2018 Farm Bill, we have our traditional programs that we've been administering, and now we have the IRA dollars that are there also, and we've identified those practices. And so this year, we'll be looking at how those our dollars are spent and the effectiveness of them. And then as we ramp up to move to further years, we'll also be looking at that. But I want to stress that all of these practices, they do certain things for soil health when we're looking at this. And a lot of these practices that we've identified also help on the livestock side of the house also. So it's not all just carbon and climate. It addresses all of the resources. And when we look at, when our folks are out on the land working with these producers and writing these conservation plans and looking at what these resource needs are, we're recommending all of our practices that we have in our repertoire to address what those needs might be. And so we're going to, I think both of these, IRA and the 2018 Farm Bill working together, it's going to be great. All of these programs are oversubscribed. We have an opportunity now to open the doors to a lot of more producers to come in and participate. So I think we're going to learn a lot.
But without the requirement for USDA to spend at least 50% of the IRA equipped funds on practices that are targeting livestock production, what percent of funding do you expect is going to go towards livestock producers?
And again, right now, we don't know what that number is going to be. But
will you, if this committee and Congress comes together, which I'm sure we will, this is a very bipartisan committee. We work well together. We try to address non-controversial issues to have in the Farm Bill. Shouldn't USDA, shouldn't your job be to follow what the authorizing committee is setting forth for these programs?
And we will follow that. And
no matter where the money's coming from?
Whatever this committee decides, that's what we will follow.
Okay. Okay. I think we'll have some further discussion on that in the future. Right. I hope you are open to that.
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Okay. Thank you very much. Seeing no other members present for the hearing, I too want to thank the panel for being here today. The information you provide us is very valuable as we work towards getting this Farm Bill done, hopefully this year. And so I appreciate that. The hearing record will remain open for 5 business days. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.